Funmto, welcome to the Power Within You podcast. It's really lovely to have you here today with me. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh no, it's just such a pleasure. I feel like I've had a major conversation with you before.
I know, right?
We talked about a lot of topics, but
Yeah.
I'm so excited to have you here with me, on a few ways, because obviously, the work you do, as a mental health professional as well, and really excited to hear about your journey and what you're doing in Lagos, but how you came to that position as well. So perhaps we can start off really, how did your interest in kind of mental health occur? Do you feel? What was it that kind of took you on this path?
Okay. So I would say it traces back to like high school or secondary school, right? So I was in, what grade was I in? I was in the 11th grade, and
11th grade,
my
yeah.
school had, we had this requirement where you had to, during the Easter break, you had to do like an internship, right, with someone, just to get that professional experience and get that idea of like, okay, what do you want to study? And so my dad he's a journalist, and he's been a journalist for over 3 decades, and I look a lot like him. And so a lot of people would tell me that, oh, you look like your dad, so maybe you should, consider being a journalist, right? So
we thought that together.
I know, right? I know, right? But anyways, I was like, okay, let me give this a shot. So I did my internship at a radio station, and I really enjoyed it. It was really good. But at the end, I kind of found myself asking, like, okay, can I do this long term? And I couldn't. I couldn't envision doing this long term, doing that long term rather. So I then started to think like, okay, what are the things that I like to do? And I came to the conclusion that I really like listening to people. And, amongst my friends, they would always like come seek me out and talk to me. And then I decided to study psychology in university. And as I got into my psychology major, I really started to see the gap that existed in mental health care back home in Nigeria. And that is what really sparked, the passion for mental health and, just challenging, the mental health system. So then I decided that, okay, after I was finished with the university, I would get my master's degree. So I got my master's, I got my bachelor's in psychology and communication, and then I got my master's in clinical mental health counseling. And it was an amazing journey. I'm really, really thankful for like the professors that I had. And while I was getting my master's, I always told myself that, okay, the goal was to come back home to Nigeria, because I was in the States. So the goal was to come back home to Nigeria, and, be able to set up my own practice. And it was an eventual goal. It's like, oh, I'll get to it eventually. But life just kind of happened, and I ended up back in Lagos sooner than I expected. But I think I came at the perfect time, and I set up my practice in October of 2021. So it's almost a year and a half. And that's what led me down this path, and that's how I got here.
And you said like life happens, right? It
Yeah,
takes down this
exactly.
path. And knowing that you had an interest in psychology at an earlier age, I think helps as well, doesn't it? Because it sets you up, and like, you think about what is needed, what's missing.
Absolutely.
And especially like just speaking to you for a few minutes, I can feel your beautiful energy. I can feel your presence. I can feel your empathy as well, and I think all those things are so necessary, aren't they, to understand
Absolutely,
human beings, And so tell me, like, at the moment, like what kind of things are you, who are you working with? Like what kind of things are you tackling in terms of subjects and stuff as well?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm a trauma therapist. So I work a lot with trauma, and I'm seeing that a whole lot. A whole lot. It's quite. It's very unfortunate. I was telling someone that, in the U.S., the statistic for women who have experienced sexual assault is 1 in 4 women. I don't know what the statistics are here in Nigeria, but I can bet that it's more than 1 in 4.
It's shocking. It's so high. 1 in 4.
Yeah, from like the experience that I've had with clients, I would bet that it's probably 2 in 4 in Nigeria, because whenever I see clients, there's the intake process, right? So just collecting background data on, things that they've experienced. And I would say at least 2 out of 4 women have experienced some form of sexual assault or either like, child abuse growing up. And it's so unfortunate just how like normal it is. Of course, it's not normal, right? It shouldn't be normal. So I see a lot of trauma. So things like that, but even from on like a smaller scale, just like trauma with like the loss of a parent or, growing up in poverty, things like that. So lots of trauma, and then as well as anxiety and depression, more anxiety than depression, as well as perfectionism. And then self-esteem related issues and life transitions. And right now I mostly work with, the clientele that have found their way to me are mostly Gen Zs and millennials. Yeah.
That is, we were saying that it's a great generation to be able to work with as well. If we go back to like, you mentioned trauma and you look at trauma, like we always thought about, when I look at PTSD, for example, you think about people who've been in wars or have been soldiers, who've been fighting, right? But I guess trauma and PTSD come up in different ways, don't they? So it is not necessarily from war. It could be from childhood.
Absolutely.
It could be from poverty, like you said, right? It could be from when you're older to sexual assault, and stuff like that. How would you recognize? Because some people go through these terrible experiences and they lock it away. It goes somewhere else, right? It doesn't. It's there, but it hasn't surfaced until something else happens. How can you start recognizing the signs of trauma yourself?
Yeah, I would say that one way you can start recognizing is actually paying attention to how your body reacts in certain situations, right?
Okay.
So you said, a lot of people like lock it away, and sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not intentional, right? Sometimes it's actually the brain trying to protect us from like really painful memories. So it kind of just happens automatically where we, the brain just stores those memories away and, just puts them out of reach, right? But even though the brain puts them away, they sometimes surface up in our body, right? So someone can be in a conversation where, maybe they're talking about something difficult or even like something not so difficult, right? And maybe they start like having an increased heart rate, or they start like sweating in their palms, or they start feeling uneasy in their stomach. So that's one way that you can recognize that, okay, what is going on with my body, right? And you can start to get curious to kind of figure out like, okay, what was going on in the environment around me? Was it something that was said to me, or was it something that I smelled, or was it something that I saw, right? Because our 5 senses play a lot in just how we react, right? So, for example, if someone lost a loved one, let's say they lost like a grandma that was pretty important to them, and their grandmother had like a particular scent, right? If their brain had locked away the death of their grandma, right, just to protect them because it's really painful. But if they go somewhere and they smell that scent, right, they could have a reaction in their body. It may not be an emotional reaction, so they may not like start crying, but they could have a reaction in their body, like their body could start feeling tense, right? So I would say that's one way, like start recognizing what your body is doing, how your body is feeling.
So true, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've done that before, like especially with scents and perfumes and things like that. You walk past someone, or a memory suddenly occurs.
Exactly.
And not always good necessarily.
It's not always good, right? And it's like, ooh, this smells like an ex or something.
Exactly. But it's so right, the physical responses, we don't really pay attention to them, right?
No, we
so
don't.
I think that's great advice.
Yeah. So
sorry to interrupt you. You said there's something else to maybe pay attention to.
Yeah.
As well.
So the physical responses, but then also another thing would be if you have emotional responses, like maybe random emotional responses. So maybe you were having like a casual conversation and someone said something, and then all of a sudden you found yourself getting emotional. I would say get curious about that. One way that you can do that is by journaling, actually. So just writing in your journal and just really exploring, like, okay, what was going on here? What was it about, like, this person, or what this person said rather, that made me have this reaction. And sometimes you may find that, maybe it's as a result of something that happened previously to you, or something that you haven't dealt with. Another way to recognize trauma is if there are certain like defenses that you have, right? So maybe like during times that are times of overwhelm or stress, your default is to run away.
Yes.
One way to get curious is to recognize that, okay, where did I learn this response, right? Why is it that whenever I experience stress or overwhelm, my default is to run away? Again, that could be an indication that, okay, maybe there's some unresolved trauma, or maybe this is just a way that your body has like adapted to dealing with, like a lot of difficulty.
The flight response, right? Like
exactly.
It's freeze, fight or flight, and then you just avoid it. Yeah,
exactly.
100%.
Yeah, but I would say that those are some ways to recognize trauma. Yeah.
When you speak about it, it feels like you're speaking about that self-awareness, right? Just bring that self-awareness in, and it's journaling. I love. I think journaling is so incredibly helpful for you to kind of be able to recognize your patterns and that sort of stuff as well. And having that ability to also recognize your emotions as well.
Yeah,
being able to think about how you're feeling and stuff. How do people? Are you able to sort of regulate your emotions? Like, are you able to? Are people, if you're feeling some sort of way, you start getting anxious, whatever it is, are you able to try something to get you down into a sort of state of being calm?
Yeah, absolutely. And so one way, this is where, really paying attention to the physical reaction starts going. Is important, right? Because let's say you're at work and you have like a physical response to something. You may not have the time. That's not the time or the place to start like figuring out like, okay, why did I have this response? You need to get back to functioning in that environment, right? Something easy that I like to recommend to clients, and I actually do it myself too, is to count. So I count from 100 backwards to 0. And you find that when you do that, you really have to pay attention to the numbers, right? Because,
I love that.
Off the top of your head, you might feel like, oh, that's so easy. It's just 100.
It's quite long, 100. So, you have to really focus on it, right?
No, you really do. Yeah. There have been times that, I think a few nights ago, I was trying to fall asleep and I was pretty restless. So I was doing it. And then I think I was at like 95, and then I jumped to 93, and I'm like, wait, hold on.
Did you reset and go back to 100 again?
I had to. Because I was like, wait, there's a whole number in between 95 and 93.
There is.
Right. So, counting backwards is easy. If the thought of counting backwards from like 100 to 0 sounds overwhelming, you can just customize it, right? You can count from 1 to 10 or from 90 to 100. But the point is to just do something that would, that you have to think about, and that would is repetitive. So that's one. Another suggestion would be, again, using the 5 senses, because the 5 senses can like trigger responses in us. They can also help ground us so we're aware of our environment. So doing something as simple as like counting the colors that are around you, or paying attention to like the scents that you can smell, right? Because we aren't always mindful, and we kind of float through the world, like automatically, right? But, grounding yourself with the 5 senses can really help. So just scanning your environment using the 5 senses. And then, of course, breathing exercises. When people hear that, sometimes they're like, oh, I don't have the time for that. But it's literally just taking out a minute to just focus on your breath.
Exactly.
Right? One method that I like to suggest to clients, and I also use myself, is to just breathe in for 3 seconds and to breathe out for 3 seconds, and repeat that like 10 times. And that's 30
it just calms
seconds.
down the heart rate. It really does. Like it's a really beautiful thing to do. Like people say, I haven't got time. I haven't got time to watch Netflix,
right?
Go on their social media, whatever. But
exactly.
Make time for it, right?
Yeah,
because that's harder to do, isn't it?
It is harder to do.
Give yourself that self-care that you need. You know, like, I don't know why as human beings we just don't do that for ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's an effort to kind of, you know, take care of ourselves.
It is effort.
You know?
It is effort, but like most things in life require effort, you know? And
absolutely. And then it becomes a habit.
Exactly.
It becomes a good habit, right? Exactly. It can turn it into something you do regularly as well. But I think it's starting it first, isn't it? To kind of get you into that mode. Of breathing. But breathing is wonderful. I think it's really helped me as well, you know, to kind of take that breath, regulate, you know, and that sort of stuff as well. I think that's great advice. Thank you so much. That's really wonderful. You know, you mentioned about also, you know, working with Gen Z and millennials as well. Now, like when I was kind of doing some research with the World Health Organization, you know, it shows that, you know, depression, anxiety is one of the most debilitating diseases for that age group.
Yes, it is.
Basically as well. So tell me what kind of things, I mean, it feels like it's not going down. It feels like it's rising.
It is. Yeah.
So I do wonder, has it always been there? We just recognize it now? Or is it something, you know, or is there more pressure that these generations are facing with social media and that sort of stuff as well?
Yeah.
Like, what are the kind of common things that you're seeing with these generations?
Yeah. So to your question, like, has it always been there? I actually don't know. I actually don't know. I do think that there's a ton of pressure. Like the pressure is insane. Like it's really ridiculous. There's a ton of pressure, and like you said, because of social media. So a lot of the things that I'm seeing with that population, I'll start with Gen Zs actually. A lot of the things that I'm seeing is a lot of anxiety, and a lot of anxiety about like the future and having to like make decisions, as well as comparison. A whole lot of comparison. So feeling behind in life, feeling like, you know, they're not where they should be. And with millennials, I'm seeing that as well. But then I'm also seeing a lot of transitions too. So either transitioning from, you know, singlehood to then having a partner, or, you know, transitioning from transitioning to becoming a mother or a father, you know, a parent, for example. But then also career stuff, right? So moving from one career to another, or finding out that the career that you've been in and that you thought that the career trajectory that you thought you would enjoy is actually no longer serving you. And, you know, there's a whole like friction, right? And it's uncomfortable. So that's what I tend to see a lot more with millennials as well. You know, just like career stuff, transitions, as well as pressure too. But I would say with both generations, with both Gen Zs and millennials, the rise of social media, just the accessibility to information. Oh my gosh.
It's overwhelming.
It's overwhelming. Oh my gosh. It's overwhelming. You know, it's
I should be like this person. I should be like that person. I should have done this by now.
Exactly.
They're 20 years older. They're multimillionaire. Why am I not multimillionaire? What am I doing wrong?
Exactly. And I think too, I know when we were talking at the beginning, you mentioned that you were in tech previously. I think too, like, you know, the rise of like tech and, you know, like all these really glamorous positions in tech, right? And seeing people at such a young age, like earning like a lot of money, which is great, right? But that has then become like the norm, right? Or like the standard, right? And so if, you know, a Gen Z or even a millennial, right, feels like their career path is different than others, there's a lot of comparison that comes with that. Like, oh, maybe I should go into tech, right? Because, well, a lot of people are making a lot of money from that.
It's true. And the thing is, like, they see entrepreneurs, they see equity, they see startups, they see like, okay, you know, like, and some people, and if they fail, then they, you know, the resilience is lacking as well, I think, sometimes, right? And like being hard on yourself and, you know, being that sort of way. And I think, you know, it was maybe easier, like with my generation of, there's quite doctor, dentist, accountant.
Yeah, it was pretty.
Pick 5 things.
Right.
Actually, computer science wasn't then an option, really.
Really?
It was just about, email and that sort of stuff was just about, you know, that's how old I am, man. I feel like a dinosaur. But it was like amazing to send an email to someone at the other side of the world and receive it back, type thing. But I know that doing that computing degree, and I went into it by complete accident, was something which really set me up well for a lot of my career, because it blew up and it was exciting to be in as well.
Yeah, you're part of that.
You know, so, and if I want to go back to it tomorrow, I could, because I've got the experience now, right, as well. But I think you're right that I see as well with millennials, the career transition, you know, like you follow a path, you go, I want to do that. They're like, oh man, that actually sucks. I don't really not enjoying it. And they're like, what do I do next?
Yep.
Where do I go from here? And then they want to do 180, but I have to do it, and it stresses them out and causes anxiety.
Yes, it does.
As well. Whereas in my dad's generation, for example, you stay at one job for 50 years, and you're done, and you retire, right? Because back then it was about feeding your family, about looking after your family, right? And providing that Maslow hierarchy of like being able to do security, shelter, and food as well. Whereas now,
the base level.
There are so many different jobs. I didn't even know these exist. You know, like there's so much choice almost. You know,
exactly.
About what you can do.
Choice.
So I can imagine that's quite overwhelming for the young generations coming up.
Yeah, it is. It is overwhelming. I think another thing that makes it overwhelming is when there's like an identity that's tied to the career, right? So if someone doesn't have like a solid sense of self, right, and then they go into a career where they're a high performer, high achiever, you know, getting all this praise, right, and then they experience burnout, or they experience like some dissatisfaction, and they realize that, okay, you know what, I actually don't want to be in this career. It can feel very unsettling, because it's like, well, then who am I? Who am I outside of this career? Right? I've built my identity around this career, around my performance, around just how great I am at my job. If I then transition to a new career, who am I? Right?
Exactly.
And it becomes unsettling.
Yes. That is so true. That is so true. I don't know if you like, I guess like the way I've seen it before is like self-confidence versus self-esteem. So like, for example, I based it on my thing, right? I was a very good project manager. I had the confidence of being a project manager. But when that was taken away and I changed my career, my self-esteem dropped. Right? I was good at what I did before, but then it suddenly went down because I didn't know who I was. And be successful and that sort of stuff. As well. So it's a real, if you base your identity on what you do as your career, and that career gets taken away, however that happens, your self-esteem is going to go up and down as well, right?
Absolutely. And I think self-esteem is one of those things that, you know, tends to exist on a continuum, right? Because like we all have moments where we feel good about ourselves, where we feel like absolute rock stars, and then we have moments where we feel like crap.
100%.
You know, like we have moments where we feel like crap. Like,
true.
even me as a therapist, you know, when I first started, it was like, am I sure? You know, should I be doing this?
I know you do though. You sort of go, well, am I good enough?
Am I good enough?
You know, exactly.
And then I started to recognize how I was trying to overcompensate, right? So in like planning for my sessions, for example, I would be like, okay, maybe I should do this activity with this client, right? So they can think that I'm a superstar therapist.
Yes.
Whoa, hold up, Funto. Hold up. Like, the client needs you to be present, right? And it can't be present if I'm trying to build my self-esteem on my performance, right? Because guess what? My performance is always going to change because there are different factors, right?
Exactly.
Like, there's factors of life, there's factors of health, just things that are outside of our control. So if our self-esteem is built on that, like you said, it's like an unsteady ground. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
So how do you mitigate that? How do you find that balance and able to, like, you know, raise your self-esteem, should I say?
Yeah. I think it's it is.
$100 question. If we knew that, we could sell it, pay lots of money.
This would be the new workshop or masterclass.
Exactly. It's so true. Sorry, it's such a big question, I know.
Yeah, but I would actually love to hear from you as well. I would love to hear your perspective too. But man, I think it's a lifelong journey, honestly. I think it's a lifelong journey, but then I also think it's like getting to that place where the beliefs that you have on yourself are not founded on what it is that you can put out, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
If, let's say, using myself as an example, if I have a session that didn't go so well, right? I can recognize that, oof, this was a session that wasn't so great. But then it doesn't make me a bad person, right? So kind of teasing apart those two, right? So separating what happened from who I am as a person, right?
Makes sense.
So if I have one session or one interaction, consultation, or I send out an email or something, right? And it's like awkward. If I have an awkward experience or an uncomfortable experience, right? It doesn't then mean that I'm a bad person. It just means that I'm human, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you learn from that, right? You kind of like,
absolutely.
It's that self-compassion, and I think we
Yes,
don't give ourselves
I love self-compassion.
that self-compassion enough, right? Like there's, I think I saw the other day on I think it might be LinkedIn. Someone had a chart of like, there's like, there's sympathy, empathy, but also self-compassion as well. So self-compassion is, giving yourself that love rather than someone else as well, right? And I think we don't do that enough.
No, we don't. We absolutely don't. Self-compassion, I like to say, it's like relating to yourself like you would a loved one, right? And someone once asked me, like,
exactly.
If a friend were to speak to you in the way that you speak to yourself, would you be friends with them? And at the time, I was like, no.
No, because you're giving yourself a hard time, right? All the time.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah, criticizing yourself, judging yourself, critiquing yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's very true.
Yeah.
It's very true.
Yeah.
I start with, I guess, helping people with helping them to understand their core beliefs. What are their values?
I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
What are their values first? So let's go into depth about your values. And then once we found out what their values are, that will help them to make those decisions in their life and, think about their career and what they want. Or looking back, that's all personal mission statement, looking back when you're 80 years old and you're able to kind of look and see what you want to achieve as well. To do that inner work, I think is super important, and that will help you to kind of balance your self-esteem,
Absolutely.
I think, going forwards. But it's always a journey. Like you said, it's a journey always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like it's a constant like balancing, right?
It's a constant balancing.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. You mentioned before as well about perfectionism. Now, perfectionism, when I talk about the inner critic, I talk about imposter syndrome. Perfectionism also occurs, but people can relate to it the most of all the different types of imposter syndrome you can have, basically. What is perfectionism, and how do you think it occurs in your work that you see?
That's a really good question. Like, how would I define perfectionism?
For me, it feels like I'm being hard on myself. Right? When I send an email and I miss a full stop, I'm like, oh, I missed a full stop.
Right.
I think I'm stupid.
Yeah. What are they going to think about me?
Yeah, exactly. It's trying to get things right all the time, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. I think that's it. Like you just said, trying to get things right all the time, or believing that you have to get things right all the time in order to feel good about yourself and in order to control the perception of others.
Yes.
So it's like you have to do something in order to get something. So I have to do something. I have to be perfect. I have to get things right all the time in order for me to really believe that I'm a good person, or in order for this person to see me as a good person.
Yeah, absolutely. And does that sort of then stem from things like childhood and how you were raised and that sort of stuff?
Absolutely. It stems from childhood, but then it's also influenced by just different life stages, right? But especially around like work and career. And, in childhood and adolescence, work and career is school, right? So that's like school work. So if you are like a high achiever in school, right? Like you're on, you're getting amazing grades, you're on honor roll, all that good stuff, right? You can feel like you have to continue doing that in order to get validation, right? And especially if the validation you received only comes when you do something well enough, or when you do something great, right? So if your parents never tell you like, oh, I appreciate you for what you did, or, you know, I love you so much, like you're such a good person. You know, if your parents never give you any validation that isn't tied to performance, because as human beings, and especially as children, we need a lot of validation, right?
Me too.
We then kind of make the connection that, okay, in order for me to get this thing that I need, I have to do X, Y, Z, right?
Yes.
So it definitely stems from childhood and adolescence, but then also, like I said, like work and career can definitely influence that too.
Yeah, no, exactly. And then how are you able to sort of break that cycle of perfectionism as well? Other sort of ways you can kind of manage it a bit better?
Yeah, there are. I would say tons of self-compassion. Tons of self-compassion, like we said.
Yes.
Tons of self-compassion. But then also, like you said, looking at those core beliefs, right? And challenging those core beliefs. So what are those things that you believe about yourself? Do you believe that you're a good person only because you're able to do X, Y, Z? Or do you just believe that you're a good person, period? Or you are worthy, right? So looking at those core beliefs, but also applying self-compassion, you know. So if in your case, if you don't add a period to an email, it doesn't mean that, you know, you're now this like person who doesn't know grammar.
Terrible human being.
Right?
Yeah. Oh, such a bad habit. I would read my emails like 1,000 times before I sent it. It was really a waste of time.
Yeah.
It really like caused a lot of time waste, and it did my head in as well. I've stopped doing it now, thankfully.
That's good.
But you do. I think you're right. Like from childhood, it does come, right. If you're not validated about you and your achievements, and it's okay to make mistakes, or it's okay to be who you are, and you know, it's tough.
Yeah,
it's tough.
And I don't know if you can relate to, you know, to this with like growing up in an Indian background, but with like a Nigerian background, a lot of like families that like tend to immigrate, for example, or grow up in societies where like wealth is important and, you know, like performance is important, right? There's a lot of focus on what you can put out, right? So it's like, oh, you need to study, you need to be high achieving, right? You need to get all the A's. And if you don't do that, why are you doing this? You know, you have other people that are also able to get A's. Why aren't you able to do that, right? So there's just like a ton of pressure that comes on the child. And usually a lot of these things come from like really young ages, right? I recently heard of someone who from primary school, they went straight into secondary school at like age 9 or something ridiculous. And I'm like, why?
It is, but why can't you just take your time?
Why?
You know, what's the rush?
Well, like, what's the actual rush? But like, that's not unheard of. Like, that is not unheard of people.
Exactly.
Like, you know, oh, this person is like really gifted. This person is like, you know, really talented. This child is really talented, rather. So let's just make them skip, right? But there's still a lot of development that's going on with that child. And if the child is only getting validation from, you know, their performance, so if they're only getting praise, for example, right, from their performance, that can be like, that can lead to like the development of perfectionism, but then it can also be confusing too. Like, okay, do mommy and daddy only think that I'm good enough when I, you know, get good grades in school, or when I do all my chores on time, you know, things like that. So like being the good child.
It's dependent on love, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. My parents will only love me if I do this right or do that right. If to do what they say, basically, right? Yeah, which I think is, oh man, lots of kids go through that, and I certainly relate to that as well. You know, it was funny I was watching you know, so about skipping like 5 years and going straight to high school. I was watching this trailer on I don't know where it was, but maybe Netflix or something, about spelling bees. And there's a bunch of Indian kids mainly, right? Trying to do these, you know, really hard words, and there's competitions, and then, you know, their mums are praying for them, and like they're going to the temple, and I'm like, oh my days, poor kids. This kid, like, one was like 5 years old, trying to spell these really complicated words. I'm like, do they enjoy it? And then as they get older, like, they can be disappointed if they
If they don't
It's
do
just that it does my head in watching it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. 5. Oh my God. That is so.
Yeah. I'm just like, why are you putting the kids through it? You know, like
Yeah.
it's
Like, I think there's a fine balance between like challenging your kids and, like just
yes,
developing, those like core reasoning parts of their brain and, just making sure that they're getting healthy development, right?
exactly.
But that needs to be balanced, right? A child is still a child.
It does.
A child needs to be able to play and to be carefree because, like, that's what childhood is about. That's what, not even just childhood, I think being a human is about, right? Because as adults,
Being
we still
human.
play, right? Our
Yeah,
play may look
exactly.
different than play in childhood, right? But we still play. We need to be able to just know that balance between like work and just like being free and exploring and enjoying, right? And
Yeah,
if that's
exactly.
taken away in childhood, it's no wonder that you would then see that child in adulthood who works too much, who doesn't have any work-life balance, who their self-esteem is probably really low, or, they are like a high achiever, right? And because of the society that we live in, because of the world that we live in, those things are rewarded. So if you're putting out,
It's
great
true.
results at work, you're going to get rewards.
Yeah,
for
no,
it.
absolutely. That's how it works, right?
Yeah.
Like it's, yeah, you know what? You're so right. There's no time. I think the only time kids get to really truly play and will learn through play is in nursery. And after that, it's just getting through the education system,
Yeah.
basically, as
Yeah.
well, right? And then
Yeah.
I have a break here and there to play football or whatever it is, but they just don't get that. And actually, through my studies, I've been understanding that, the emotional brain doesn't fully develop until you're 25,
25. Yep.
right? It's a long, you've got
It's
a
a
journey to that
long
point.
time.
It's a long time. And then you go, do you know what? Maybe I need therapy after 25.
I know, right? When I turned 25, I was like, oh, my brain is developed now. Like I'm done.
Now I need to talk about my shit.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so true. It's just, this is nuts place, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
But it's and that's why, when we spoke previously, you're saying that you'd love to work with adolescents and that's what
I
you're
do.
sort of heading towards. Tell me more about that. Tell me about your dreams and your goals for the next sort of couple of years.
Yeah. So that question actually used to intimidate me before.
Did it really? No way. Oh, I'm sorry if it did.
No,
Like,
it's okay.
Yeah, sure.
I'm more
Okay.
comfortable with it. Yeah. Previously, it used to like intimidate me, but I think that was just as a result of like experiencing disappointments and experiencing
Sure.
like things not going according to plan.
Yes, of course.
But I've learned to embrace flexibility, right?
Good for you. I
And
love that.
dream again. So I'll talk about adolescence first, like adolescent therapy, and then I'll kind of share like my dream and my goals. So with adolescent therapy, how I actually ended up, developing an interest with that was I was in, I think, my third year of university, and I had an internship. I worked at a shelter for at-risk youth. So these were youth who had either like run away or they were in CPS custody. So they were in Child Protective Services custody, right? So there was tons of trauma, just, tons of like difficulty, right? And I was so intimidated. I was like, oh my God, teenagers are mean and,
Yeah.
they're not nice. And I also had my experiences of, just like dealing with like low self-esteem as a teenager, right? So it's just
Yes.
like, I don't.
School's a hard place as an
It's
adolescent. Yeah.
It's really hard.
It's tough.
Very
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, I don't want to work with adolescents. But then as I just continued working with them, I was like, oh my God, my kids. It's like
Attachment grows, right? Yeah.
it grew so much. Like whatever, like, I don't know, defense mechanism that I put up, like it melted away instantly, right?
That's
And they were
amazing.
still like, teenagers can be annoying, so there was still some, annoyance with that. But like at the end of the day, they were really warm, they were really nice. So that's what really like sparked the interest with like adolescent therapy. And as I, continued on with university and my master's, I focused on that a little bit more, worked with at-risk youth more, and just like teenagers who were experiencing like mental health crisis. So teens who had either like previously maybe attempted suicide or like, you know, just a lot of like high risk behavior. And, you know, in working with them, I just started to think about the fact that, in my opinion, at least, I think adolescence is one of the most important life stages, right? Because this is where your brain is still growing, but then also like a lot of the habits that we see in childhood, in adulthood, are being formed there. So adolescence is kind of that sweet spot where we can, you know, start to change or like question some of those habits. You know, so that's what really got me on that journey.
And are the adolescents receptive to that as well? And are they kind of, is it going in and like they're trying to...
So I would say like doing therapy with an adolescent is a little different than doing therapy with an adult.
I bet.
It's a little different. It also depends on how they are. So like with like the more mature teens, so like, you know, the 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds, they can be more receptive to it. But with the younger teens, so like, you know, like a 10-year-old and 11-year-old, it's doing things like activities with them, but then also like discussing with them. But adolescent therapy, you really have to develop rapport, right? You really have to develop rapport. And I think as they start to see you as like this trusted person, they then become a little more receptive. But there's still pushback. There's still
I can imagine
tons of pushback.
So you have to be like quite. You have to. I mean, you know, it's not easy, is it? Like you have to keep going and keep being able to like be with them and understand them, and empathize with them. You know.
Exactly. And you know, I don't think adolescents get that a lot, especially adolescents that grow up, you know, in like society like ours, like, you know, like where there's like a lot of pressure, right? That's placed on them. I think a lot of adults see, especially parents, like see adolescents like, oh, like, are you really going through any struggle, or your struggles like valid, or, you know, and kind of like invalidate them. But just being that person that kind of validates and like lets them know like, hey, what you are going through is tough, right? It's very important for them.
I can. It's a tough job, but like such a necessary one as well. I think to help young people, to help them to be more resilient and more balanced, and, you know, aware as they get older as well. I think that's beautiful work. I can't wait to see what you do with adolescents.
Thank you.
In the future.
Thank you. So right now the goal is to start working with adolescents in Nigeria. So a lot of my work with adolescents has been in the States. So I'm transitioning to working with adolescents in Nigeria. And, you know, I'm looking at that through like schools, but then also like religious organizations, right? Because at the end of the day, I had to get consent from parents, right? So there needs to be a level of trust that's developed. So I'm hoping that a goal of mine and a dream of mine is to be able to have therapy with adolescents, but then also just get parents involved, you know, like kind of disrupt some of those like difficulties and like traumas that I experienced in school. Like we said, you know, like school is a really tough place. It's a really tough place. And I don't think that we understand how tough it is. And, you know, just being vulnerable here. I was having a conversation with my mom last night, actually, and I was saying to her that, oh, like I think I'm innovative, and she was like, yeah, like you're pretty creative, like, you know, like out of all your siblings, like I was like very creative as a baby. And she was telling me about like the things that I would do, the creative stuff, and I never really viewed myself as a creative person. And then I asked her like, okay, when did this like creativity kind of like stop? When did you notice that it stopped? And she was like, when you got into high school. I was like, wow,
interesting, because it got suppressed because you were dealing with other stuff, right?
With other stuff, exactly. Exactly.
And then that's the thing, isn't it? Like, and then it can resurface as you get older, right? You sort of go back to that creativity, I think, as well. But like, it shouldn't stop though, should it? Like,
it shouldn't.
It shouldn't stop, right?
It shouldn't
stop. But trauma or like what you're going through stops that creativity. You know, I'm sorry to hear that, man. Like, it's just,
no, it's okay.
tough.
It's okay.
Is it coming back? Is there
It is
creativity
coming back. It's coming
Yeah,
back.
that's
Just
it.
the recognition, even being able to call myself a creative person is already big progress in itself. But just, it's coming back. Something random that I used to do as a kid, it was whenever I would go to the beach, I would always pick up like seashells. And, you know, I would like paint them. No, I didn't listen to them, but I would like clean them and I would paint them, and they were like all over the house. And then I went to the beach like a few months back, and I picked up a lot of seashells, and it just felt really good to do that. So
That
it's
sounds
coming
beautiful.
back.
I love that. Oh, I love that. I love that. The beach was my favourite thing as a kid. You know, like my mum and dad would know that I wanted to go to the beach with my like bucket and spade, basically.
Right, I love that.
Like, please do. And I still do. I still love the beach. You know, like I live in England, so like you're not really
You don't really
in
go
the
to the
countryside.
beach,
I'm Yorkshire.
right.
Exactly. That's so wonderful. Like your advice has been invaluable today, and your story and your just the wonderful work that you're doing. I can't wait to see what you do next.
Oh, thank you.
You know, for sure. But I'd like to ask you this last question, if that's okay.
Okay.
And that is, how do you find the power within you to kind of manage your own sort of mental health journey now and for the future?
How do I find the power within me? I think definitely going through my own therapy has helped me find the power within me, and just doing that work around self-esteem a lot, you know, because that was like the major like challenge that I had, like just like poor self-esteem. So recognizing that, okay, I am worthy, right? I am a good person. I am good enough. Recognizing that, but then also doing things that feed me as a person, right? So because I'm a therapist and because I'm really passionate about therapy, it became a thing where my identity was morphed into like being a therapist, right?
Yeah.
And so I've had to tease that apart. Like, okay, no, what can I do to feed Funmto the person, right? So how I find the power within me is, man, by doing the things that I enjoy, right? So
like picking up those seashells, man.
Yeah,
Going
picking
to
up the
beach,
seashells,
right?
picking up the seashells, going to the
That's
beach,
it.
doing things outside of my comfort zone.
I love that.
And just allowing myself to have those new experiences, and staying true to myself, right? Because when we go through a lot of trauma, there's a self that emerges, right, as a result of trauma, and it's a self that's trying to protect us from experiencing the trauma. But that's not the true self, right? So going back to the true self, going back to the little kid in me that likes to play around, that likes to make other people laugh and just have a good time, that definitely helps me find the power within me. I hope I answered the question.
That's a beautiful answer. Like, honestly, like I think I love that you're on your own journey and you're being able to tease apart those two things, right? And finding that child within you as well. I love that as well, you know, like I feel like it's so important to be that, to feel your inner child and be your inner child as well.
Absolutely.
That never goes, I don't think.
No, it doesn't.
So I think that's a beautiful place to be, right? Yeah, exactly. And to find your authentic self as well, to find your true inner self in what you're about, because ultimately you want to live your day-to-day happy and joyful, right? And only you can kind of find that for yourself.
There. Yeah.
I think as well, you know. Wonderful conversation. Like, honestly, I've had such a great time speaking with you and learning so much from you as well.
Likewise.
Like, how could people get in touch with you? Like, if they wanted to talk to you or kind of explore therapy a bit further with you, what's the best way to kind of get in touch?
Yeah, definitely. So the best way would be through the website or through Instagram. So the website is ibiayo.com. I actually never said the name of my practice. It's called Ibi Ayo, which is a Yoruba, Yoruba word. So it's the language that I speak, and it means place of joy in English.
Beautiful.
The best way would be through the websites. It's ibiayo.com. Or on Instagram, it's ibii.ayo. That would be the best way to just get in contact with me.
That's perfect. And please do, you know, like I think just having this chat with you here and, you know, learning and vibing and, you know, understanding and like, right. It's been so lovely. So Funmto, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
I appreciate your time and I can't wait for this episode to go live.
Yeah, me too. I'm really excited. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah.
All right. See you soon.
Alrighty.